Vulcan, the ruler, sacred planet ruler of the first ray of will and purpose, corresponding to the crown center, doesn't really have too much of an impact on individuals until they start working with the soul. Vulcan is the esoteric and hierarchical ruler of Taurus. Taurus governs the world disciple as a whole. So the way in which Vulcan has this specific connection to those working with the soul. In the mythology, he is the blacksmith of the gods that hammers the tools, the weapons, the beautiful jewels. And he is a master of fire. Esoterically, fire is the element of consciousness. So a very, very powerful, creative god. So today we will be considering this first ray ruler. The mythology can tell us quite a bit about Vulcan. There's different variations, but the essence is something like this. He is born to Jupiter and Juno, or Zeus and Hera, but he is really ugly and he is rejected by the mother in some variations of the tale, by the father in other variations. He is sent to Earth. He is taken in by some of these sea watery goddesses, and there on Earth he goes to the core. He's working in the volcanic depths of the Earth, and he learns how to create and work with these very dense, heavy substances to create these beautiful tools and jewels, basically. He then gets his revenge on his mother, where he makes, in some versions, a throne, in others a necklace, and she is, of course, oh my goodness, it is just the most beautiful thing. She sits in the throne, wears the necklace, and then it traps her. And there Vulcan gets his revenge, and he says, I will release you upon these different conditions, one of them being that he gets to marry Aphrodite, aka Venus. So Taurus ruled by Venus exoterically, Vulcan ruling it esoterically, the marriage between these two forces. So there's a few different things going on here. I've inferred in a couple other videos that I had been recently going through some openings in the crown and had been having some pretty heavy, interesting masculine dreams. In one of the dreams, a very massive dude, Hulk-like, Vulcan-like character, big, ugly, muscly, almost beast-like, had killed my mother in the dream and was threatening to kill me. It was going to rape and kill me. And rape, you know, it's a heavy word, but when we're speaking about these concepts symbolically, and there's a different way in which we're shaping these forces here, okay, and interpreting these forces. So this is a very interesting dream, because what does Vulcan do in the myth, right? He actually kills, or he doesn't kill the mother, but, you know, he gets a bit of a fuck you to the mother principle there. And it's interesting to consider the ways in which we might say that the form nature can resist being penetrated by pure consciousness. In the sign Taurus, which does tell us a lot about how Vulcan works and makes its impact, we're talking about this directive, pure will. Vulcan's really close to the sun, right? So he's coming in directly from the sun to go all the way to the core of matter. Taurus is a fixed earth sign. In the myth, he goes all the way to the core of the earth, working with the core substances at the base of these volcanoes, right? And he builds the forms. So this penetrative energy, first ray, is penetrative. It's the will aspect. And so the way in which that force is interpreted by the body, DK says when we call it force, when he refers to it as force, that's the response of the body in its exoteric way to this will energy, and the way in which that surfaces in Taurus is desire. So it's interesting to consider how when we bring that will energy online, it does begin to transfigure. Think of what a blacksmith does, you know, burning the hot irons and then bashing it into the right shape. It transfigures and transforms substance. And that is not always a comfortable process. And so in the sign Taurus, we have all of this wisdom and intelligence that emerges of things like sexual transmutation. Interesting that Venus as she expresses exoterically on the astral plane, with her union of opposites thing, is often associated with sex, romance, lust, desire, right? And particularly in Taurus, the desire for materiality and beautiful things, okay? So the way in which there is this transmutation of personal desire into immense will. So we might say, okay, this co-opting of the original mother principle, something about, I mean, this is just speculative, right? We're playing around how it can affect our current level of human psychology at the mass level, but a certain resistance to the immensity and the density and the penetrative power of this first ray energy, which can be destructive and maybe a bit ugly in some sense, at least in the way that it brings death to things, which isn't always what we like to happen from the level of personal identification. But then the desire to merge with the form and to create something beautiful. So that's very Venusian there, right? Esoterically, then we've got the crown chakra with the first ray and the ajna with the fifth ray, and there's Venus there in her esoteric expression. So the idea of the permeating substance with light and the right crafting of the form so that it becomes a pure reflection of deity. This is the Taurian qualities here, once again revealing the function of Vulcan, okay, whether we have strong Taurian placements at the individual level or not. We've all got Vulcan active somewhere in the chart, close to the sun. And so the implication here being that when we start to work with the soul, there is necessarily a transfigurative process that goes on, and a redirecting to the higher will, a sensing of the higher will, and the penetrative potency of that. We think about how, for instance, Venus has her, she's lessened in Aries, for instance, right? Well, esoterically, why is that? It's due to the fact that the sun or the spirit has its exaltation in the sign of pure will, being Aries, is the most kind of ultimate expression of that first ray energy. And so the lesser luminary, in this case, Venus in her esoteric meaning, fades out. So the idea being that this first ray principle is this originating, most potent and powerful principle, which makes it quite difficult to work with, as will affects us in terms of the inversion of will. It becomes the dictator, it becomes the destroyer, the killer, the serial killer. Maybe, I mean, I mentioned my dream, right, that this Vulcan-like figure is so something working out in my personal psyche with this destructive energy. But when that becomes rightly appropriated in its pure form, it is that which just kills off all of that which is just not true. This is what fire does esoterically as well. Purificatory fire. It burns through all of that which is false and irrelevant and boils something down to its pure substance. This is why Taurus is referred to as being a fashioner of souls. It's a crafter of the form, a crafter of the personality, and a beautifier in that way. And as Vulcan was ugly, he also made the most beautiful jewels as well as the weapons of the gods as well. Okay, so I'm throwing around a few ideas here, but painting a picture of how this energy comes and interacts with our systems. So will energy is a difficult one to work with. Hitler is a good example. I've mentioned him a couple times. He was a Taurus sun, so someone who you would actually describe as being a slightly more advanced person. Yes, evil, obviously, but advanced in the way that he was beginning to respond to esoteric influences, but due to a very corrupt personality and the selfishness, the complete inversion of that first ray energy. But the implication there being with the first ray energy, and in Placidus he's got this prominent Leonian midheaven, which is also that's the dictator sign in its shadow. The capacity for Vulcan or the first ray energy to synthesize and bring all the things together, it's very different from a more what we might consider a feminine way of synthesis through merging and harmonizing in this more delicate way, maybe a more Venusian or Libran way, or a Virgoic way even with the moon, and more like that punch which just penetrates form so immensely that it transfigures it, right? So think of the blacksmith, and crafting the substance like that. So point being that the first ray energy is very synthesizing. So understanding Vulcan really tells us a lot about the nature of the first ray. Now, it is a sacred ruler, the sacred planet ruler, in comparison with Pluto, where Pluto, and I mean, I was saying this before with Vulcan as well, but with Pluto, we really see the destroying everything that is in the way of consciousness. So, okay, so how are they different then? Well, when we have Pluto activate, he highlights, brings out all this gunk from the depths, right? And goes, oh, look at all of this shadowy material. Uh-oh, the Maya, its connection to Scorpio there. Okay, having to cut the ties there. And then with Vulcan though, it's something like, as Vulcan makes impacts in the crown center, it's that sense of knowing the plan. This is the vision of deity, this is the plan of deity, and this is what must be done. And it becomes a very vitalizing force. And can you see how that is the higher expression of desire? Coming again back to Taurus, from desire to aspiration to unbeatable will. That's why Taurus goes through that struggle of duality, the form and the lower desire, and then eventually coming out with this immovable creative will after that transmutative process takes place. But Vulcan has more of the, yes, it's destructive, but it's more that it permeates the form with the higher light, and in that brings it into its integrity. So it's much more of the crafting and creator energy, as opposed to Pluto, which isn't necessarily creative, but it's the pure lower destructive. Pluto is said to rule the lesser burning ground. So Plutonic tests will more show you the illusions and the illusions, delusions of the life, where Vulcan, when it starts to have its impacts, will start fashioning you into moving in alignment with that greater will, and having to synthesize and elevate everything into alignment with that will. Hence it being creative, the blacksmith, and that which synthesizes and harmonizes and allows for Venusian beauty to emerge and be the case, where the form is now irradiated with light to reflect the divine perfection of deity.